Welcome back, everyone, to the Even Your Dynasty show. We got Ricky here today. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right. It's Friday. Can't really complain there. No Dan today, just so everyone knows. He's taking care of his pops. So hopefully, your dad's doing all right, Dan. If you're watching, if your dad's watching, hopefully maybe we can give him a few laughs or something. I don't know. So,
For sure. For sure.
yeah. But all right. Well, we're gonna let everyone kind of filter in here for a few minutes while we're waiting for everyone to jump in before we kind of jump into the meat of this whole thing. But I don't know. How you doing, man? You have a good week?
Oh yeah, just ready for this work week to get over with. Hoping to get some more Giants news. Get this offseason pushing along a little bit more. Feel
Yeah.
like we've gotten to pretty much like the most dead point of the offseason so far. So,
Yeah.
we're pretty much down to Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, and that's pretty much
Yeah.
about it for the most part. Who knows if any big trades are going to happen at this point? We're getting pretty much down to the nitty gritty here with the off season. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not too confident that the Giants are going to be making many moves at this point, other than some spring training invites. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if not much else happens until after the season gets going. Maybe an injury happens and a trade comes through or something. But that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I agree. The only other name that I've seen kind of floated out there that I think is maybe a possibility is Grichuk.
Mhm.
If they decide to go that way. But even Aaron just dropped that too in the chat. But even with Grichuk, like I kind of feel like it's unlikely after hearing what Bob Melvin said in his interview the other day. I kind of mentioned it on the last video I just made yesterday morning, where he made it pretty clear that the team kind of wants to keep a door open for these young guys to have an opportunity to come in and win a job. Now that you know that may or may not be true at the end of the day. Who knows? The executives around the league, they're known to either say half truths or drop something and then just do the complete opposite like 2 days later. So you never really know um, if that's going to be true or not. But I did like to hear like hearing him say that.
Yeah, for sure. And as some of these people start rolling in, I see people mention Ha-Seong Kim still potentially being a possibility, and I say, why not? Honestly, I do have some confidence in Fitz being a steady presence at second base, but if you can get Kim on the cheap and you're not really worried about anything from him for the first couple of months while he comes back from a pretty big injury, I don't see why not. At this point in the offseason, guys aren't going to be super expensive outside of the top two guys I just mentioned. So, I say why not, honestly, if you just want to continue adding depth to your team and kind of raising the floor. He's
Yeah,
not somebody that's going to completely lift your ceiling, but he will raise that floor when you're, kind of a 80 to 83 win team the last few years. He's somebody that can definitely kind of help, get you another, maybe win or two over the course of the season, along
yeah.
with the, Verlander and Adames ads. So I say, why not, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. It's a good fallback in case Fitzgerald just doesn't progress at all. If he does suffer some big regression, which obviously no one here is predicting it. Obviously, I've come out and said like I have concerns with his swing and miss. I don't think what he did, hitting 280 with an 800 plus OPS when the entirety of his power is to the pull side. He has pretty limited power up the middle and opposite field. The speed is going to get him some extra base hits, or a few extra base hits, I should say. But you can't really have a 30% whiff and strikeout rate and expect to hit 280 every year like that. I do think there is going to be a level of regression on those numbers if he continues that. And you look at this team, and they don't really have an ideal leadoff hitter. You have Wade, who, as we've I mean, somebody so eloquently put it in my chat last week that he is about as slow as the second coming of Christ. Um, that one killed me. If you whoever it was, I think it might have been Tom who's sitting in here, but I thought that was hilarious. But you have Wade who gets on base, but he's slow. Then you have Fitzgerald who had an above average on base percentage and it's fast, but I kind of expect that to dial back a little bit. And then you could potentially get a guy like Kim who's got a lot better bat to ball skills, really solid defensively. You'd have to find a way to still get Fitzgerald in the lineup every day, I think, but Kim might make a little bit more sense up near the top of the order. I know he doesn't hit for the average. A lot of people would prefer there, but he does get on base at an above average clip and he does steal a lot of bags. So I feel like you could pair him at the top and it could be a pretty nice, little duo for table setting.
Yeah, no doubt. And Mark, yeah, he should be coming back in, I believe, late May is kind of what they're estimating. So, I mean, obviously that's been the biggest hindrance on his value so far. So yeah, I mean, a 1 to 2 year deal, you very well might be able to get him on something like that, and it's not going to cost you a lot. And I guarantee he would still like to be here just with Jung Hoo Lee being here. So yeah, I say why not. I feel like I would like that fit a lot better than going and reaching for some outfielder at this point, like a Grichuk, just because I really don't see him being a huge, floor raiser on this team. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of more of the same of what we've been doing the last couple of years, where we're blocking younger talent from, getting a chance to see if they can actually raise the ceiling of the team and see what they got and see if these guys can actually reach some of their potential. Especially with, if any of you guys hadn't seen already, Anthony Santander signed with the Blue Jays earlier this week. So a guy like that being off the market, you really don't have much in terms of outfield out there anymore. So
yeah,
I think you kind of need to focus on other areas to improve the team.
Yeah. So Joaquin, he tore his labrum on his throwing shoulder. So that's where a lot of the concern was for him possibly being able to stick at shortstop was, is he going to be able to make that throw this season even? That's why, Ricky and I, Dan, we were all a lot higher on getting Adames. We were really happy when they signed Adames instead of settling for Ha-Seong Kim. But I think at second base, it'd be reasonable to think that he could make the throw from second. You could kind of maneuver people around. Like Mike actually says here, we don't really have a backup shortstop right now. I think Fitzgerald would probably be considered your backup shortstop, and that's not ideal as we saw last season. Maybe Casey Schmidt is your backup shortstop, but we haven't really been thrilled about the range he has there. I love his glove overall. I love his arm strength. He clearly has the arm for shortstop, but the range leaves something to be desired. Now, if you had Fitzgerald or Kim or whoever like on its second, and then Chapman on his right over at third, then maybe you can get away with a little bit less range at that position. But yeah, I mean, like Mike says, we don't really have a backup shortstop. So, getting Kim, if he was kind of more of a contingency, because I do think he could at least play like a league average shortstop, even if his arm wasn't great. I mean, we watched Nick Ahmed, who had kind of no arm, and he was considered a plus defender at short. So I do think he could be fine there. It's not what you really want for 162. So as a backup, it's a good fit in my opinion.
And honestly, I mean, Adames is not really the type of dude you're worried about needing to have a backup fill in for too many games. Him and Chapman are going to be playing almost every single day. It's kind of think of when it wasn't too ideal when Crawford had basically Tyro as his backup, and Tyro was coming in and starting, maybe like 15 games in a season, because, even later in his career, Crawford was still out there damn near every day, other than an occasional day off. So I liken it to that. And that was by no means ideal. Tyro is very solid defensively at second base, but then you put him over at short, and you're seeing him boot balls, sometimes having trouble getting balls over to first, and also just not having quite the same range he had over at second. So I I don't think it would be a huge concern, but I mean, like you guys said, like Mike said, it would just give you that much more insurance and give you a little bit more steady option. In case Adamas does end up getting hurt or something, later in the season, it could really help your season from spiraling.
Yeah, 100%. Because you never know. I mean, as healthy as Adamas and Chapman have been historically in their career, you never know when a freak thing's going to hit and, someone breaks a finger or something, that causes them to miss some time. It's good to have the depth. Gonna ask or pull up one more here, or a couple more, and then I'm gonna jump into one last thing with Kim. Do we have any good middle infield in Sacramento? Not really. You have Christian Koss down there, who maybe he's a 4A player. He's still, I think he's what, 26, 27.
Yeah, he's on the older side. He's not a prospect.
Yeah. So I don't think he has any major league experience. So, he's a guy maybe you bring up. He could be a depth piece, but that's all you really have. You're going to have Luciano probably playing left field. Not that anybody I think here is really actively rooting for him to play short ever again.
Mhm.
Brett Wisely, I mean, that's kind of what you got down in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Diego is down in Richmond. He'll probably start the season in Richmond if I had to guess.
Mhm.
He could be a relatively quick promotion because he did get like 100 I think he got around 200 plate appearances in
Yeah.
Richmond last season. So he might get, mid-season promotion up the sack, but he's, in my opinion, more of a second baseman than a shortstop.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all we have. So, I mean, a Kim signing could be really solid for depth.
Mhm. Yeah, honestly, in terms of middle infield help, since he's asking about that in Sacramento, like you said, not only with Diego, but with guys like Quinn and some of these other guys, most of your middle infield help is really on the second base side, and they're pretty much all probably a year and a half to 2 years away, honestly, from kind of scratching the surface of the big leagues. I don't see them, unless things gone terribly wrong, bringing a guy like Diego up at all this year, because you're not going to want to, use an option year on him
Yeah.
when, he would not really be playing much for the most part, like I said, unless you had some catastrophic injuries. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where they're at. And I mean, we've talked about it in previous shows. There's just really not a lot of depth at shortstop. Most of these guys, like I said, are more of second basemen if you project them at the major league level. And the shortstops you do have are very far down the road, more in like the San Jose or, Eugene area right now. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and even then, guys like Walker Martin, I'm not so sure that he's going to stick at short either. He had a ton of errors down in San Jose last year, and they started playing him at second a lot. So,
Yeah. I mean, if I'm being honest, the closest person in the Giants system that could be a plus defender at shortstop is probably Averson Arteaga, who will likely
yeah.
start in Richmond next
Hmm.
season. That's going to be the closest, but his bat is nowhere near major league caliber right now. He
No.
has some nice power in it, but lots of swing and miss. Doesn't hit for much average. And when I say has nice power, I mean he could probably pop like 15 to 20. So it's not like enough power to carry him. So great glove though. I mean, he's actually drawn like Crawford comparisons with his glove, but the bat is nowhere near ready. So yeah, and this is why we before this offseason even started, and you listened to us last season, we were so adamant that this was the time to drop a long-term deal on a guy like Adamas, and they did. So, you know, can't no complaints here on what they did.
Yeah.
So I can't find Diego when he needs to be added. I believe he would need to be added to the 40 man. I'm trying to remember. One of the sites has it, and I didn't see it on Fangraphs. I'm trying um MILB maybe.
Should be next off season, I believe.
Yeah, it was either next
Because
or the following because he's his age 21 season.
yeah, so this would be his fifth season in the minor league. So I believe after this season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Usually one of them has it, and I find it pretty quickly, but today I can't. Yeah, so kind of like Ricky's point, you'd have to burn him. You'd have to bring him up a year early on the 40 man, and then we saw that with several different players, but you'd be bringing him up a year early, and you'd be burning an option when he's probably not quite ready. So it doesn't really make sense on that front. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I just there's not much in middle, especially at shortstop. So it's you have really one opportunity to have a plus defender at shortstop this season, and it's going to be Adames turning it back around and being what he was for a couple straight years before last season. So, yeah. New top 100 list was not kind of the Giants. No, it was not. For those of you that looked at a couple different lists, because now a few of them are out. Baseball America, they had one. MLB Pipeline, they had one. I think we all know who that one person is. They were a little bit of variance on the rankings there. MLB Pipeline had Bryce at number 24, and Baseball America actually had him at number 12. So Baseball America is very high on it. Generally speaking, I'm not just saying this because, hey, they had him ranked higher, but I think most people kind of trust Baseball America's rankings a little more than MLB Pipeline, but they both do good work, and it's all objective, or it's all arbitrary. It's all subjective to these different writers' opinions and what they value personally. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, and Big Al, honestly, I think can we get confirmation on Joshua's first name pronunciation?
Yeah,
What
okay,
was it
so
again? It was Joshua?
Joshua. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like Josh Uar.
We were apparently pronouncing it incorrectly before, so apologies on that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of conflicting reports. I mean, even after the signing, everybody's calling him two different last names. He has two last names, but some people are calling him one last name, and then his jersey ended up having his other last name. So it was very odd.
Yeah.
Anyways, on him, I honestly think he'll be in the top 100 on, say, MLB.com much earlier than that, honestly. With as big of a signing and as he was basically the top of his class. Don't expect Roki to be sitting in the top 100 of prospect list, even though I really don't think he should be at all because he's 23 and he's going to hit the big leagues right away. So Joshua was basically the top of his class for the international signings this year. And I fully expect him to be put in there very quickly because of how highly regarded he is. And honestly, I fully expect a bounce back from Carson Whisenhunt. I think he could be in the 85 to 100 range on the top 100. I honestly think there's a couple other guys you could make an argument for too. I mean, Tibbs, he could easily have a bounce back year. I try not to really look too heavily into production right after finishing a college season. It's a long year for these guys, and they're getting thrown right into the mix. Like, we saw him appear in games like 3 weeks after being drafted, 4 weeks after being drafted. So
Yeah.
And he went up to Eugene. He wasn't killing it in San Jose, but he wasn't bad.
He was hitting 400 in San Jose.
Yeah.
He just got it, but he no power.
Well, exactly. It was.
Yeah.
I liken it a lot to what Bryce was doing in San Jose.
Yeah.
Bryce wasn't going on a power tear his first year right out of being drafted. So I fully expect Whisenhunt and Bryce, Tibbs, to both take off early on in the minor league season this year. So I mean, you could very easily see 3 top 100 guys, or 4 by the end of the season. There's a lot of different ways things could play out. So I try not to look too much into that.
You're stealing my bold prediction for whenever we do that video. Hint, hint for everybody. There's a little spoiler whenever we get that video going. But yeah, we'll pull a couple. I do think Josh War by the start of next season will be in the top 100. Like he said, Whisenhunt, I'd expect a bounce back. I'm going to pull like 2 or 3 more comments, and then we'll get running on this. Whisenhunt, he was ranked number 8 he was the number 8 ranked left-handed pitching prospect. I think that's the list you're referring to. That's the one I shared,
Yes.
I know, on Instagram and X this morning. For anybody that wants to just get excited about a pitcher's changeup, check those posts out. It's pretty nasty. Couple more. Reggie Crawford, I do not expect it because he also suffered a torn labrum, and supposedly he might not pitch this season.
Yeah.
Just rough injury luck for that guy.
I said it with Kim having the same thing when the Giants were still looking for a shortstop. Those are very serious injuries to guys who definitely need to depend on their throwing arm. So I don't know. I'm high on Reggie's ability. I'm not high on his ability to stay healthy. And so that's my biggest concern. If he were going to play this year, I'd say absolutely. I was a big fan of him getting promoted to Sacramento, even though he hadn't pitched much in Richmond this year, just because of his strikeout numbers. I mean, I think we talked about this earlier in the week or last week, and at one point he had 17 Ks per 9 innings before getting promoted from Richmond to Sacramento. So he's got nasty stuff. Like I'm a huge believer in that if he can manage to stay healthy. But unfortunately, when these guys are max velo type guys, they're going to be very prone to injuries all the time. I mean, look at the Dodgers' entire organization for the last 5 years. It's the same situation, just maxing out on velocity and not really being used to throwing a ton of innings coming out of college and, not really developing that in the minors. And then, you lose half a season at a time, or in this case, possibly a full season. So,
yeah. And the one thing that it makes sense for Wisenhunt to stay down in Sacramento to start the year is he threw 109 innings last season, and it was his first. That was the most innings in his career. So,
and that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, these guys do need to build up their arm strength. It's something we've harped on. I would expect that number to jump pretty significantly. If he pitches the whole year down there, I'd be expecting that actually to be pushing closer to like 135, 140, especially with the way Posey and Wynn have talked. So, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, with Crawford, I mean, I thought he was going to be in the pen last season. I thought he was going to, by the end of the season, I thought he would have been in the pen. And then he had that injury in June, and we didn't see him again afterward. And it's, it's really unfortunate because he didn't even have the surgery until like the season ended. So clearly it had to have been they called it a bicep impingement first. And he was at Rickwood, and, like a bunch of prospects went to that Rickwood game, and they said, oh, it was a biceps impingement because we hadn't seen him for a few weeks. And he said, oh, I'm going to start throwing again here in like a week or two. And then we just never heard anything from him the rest of the season. And it was like, because, nobody, discloses an injury information of young players quite like Major League Baseball. It's terrible. But
yep. Yeah, I mean, his stuff, if any of you guys have ever watched any video on him, it's 100% Major League stuff. He's got 3 very high-end pitches, but commands a little bit of a concern. And then, like I said, just injuries. And he was a guy that they were definitely trying to move quickly because he had lost so much time to injury in the past, and he's a little bit older of a prospect. And that's unfortunately the risk you take on when you get these guys that have already accrued a few years in college, and then you really are relying on that first rounder to come through. You need them to come up quick, and that just doesn't seem to be the case with Crawford. So,
yeah, it's really unfortunate. Couple more things here really quick before we jump into this. Tying this into another one. Thoughts on Grichuk, or would you let Matos play? I would let Matos play. Liam kind of asked the same thing. I think we should give Matos an opportunity in the outfield. I agree. Yep. I think if Matos has the kind of spring training he had last season, and Mike Yastrzemski has the kind of spring training he had last season, I'm going to be pretty upset if Matos isn't the starting outfielder or the starting, probably left fielder. I'm guessing they would shift Ramos to right. Just my 2 cents. I think he's a better fielder. So if they do that, I would love for the Giants to stay true to their word and say this guy earned a job, but I can't say I have confidence in that happening. Like they'll still make up some excuse to have Yaz out there 5 days a week, and it'll drive us all insane. But couple others, Whitman. Yeah, I've seen few people talk about Whitman. You're definitely high on him. That's actually Ricky and I are both higher on Whitman, I think, than definitely Wisenhunt. And I really like Wisenhunt as a pitching prospect. I just like Whitman's overall pitch mix. Yeah, Rayner, he's definitely a guy that could be on the rise. And then the last one, we know about Joshua, but y'all know about the rest of the international class and who we should pay attention to. The other big name was Gene Macaris, and then Julian Barreto was another big name, and then there was a catcher that I keep drawing a blank on, but he was like $50,000. But you just never know with these guys.
So. Yeah, mainly Macaris. Macaris is the guy we talked about before, kind of higher floor hitter. Probably not going to hit for a ton of power, but honestly, who knows? He's 16. So you don't really know yet. He could absolutely develop that later on. He has a nice swing. Doesn't really project as a future center fielder, more of probably a corner outfield guy. But yeah, and then I don't think we really have too much info on Barreto, honestly, to make like much of an evaluation. Macaris is a little bit more well-known because although he came out of Aruba, he played in a lot of international tournaments all over the world as a young kid, playing a lot of high-level baseball. So there's a lot more video and information out on him. So we'll see. I mean, if you guys ever want to take a look at some of these guys and how they're doing, you just got to look at, the DSL stats, because that's where all those guys are going to be this year. They're all very young. I mean, Joshua, we could see at the Complex League with him being a year older. But, I mean, it really just kind of depends on how these guys do.
Yeah, for sure. Carlos Martinez was the catcher. Thank you, Tom. I was trying to blank on his name. The only thing I saw with Barreto was kind of line drive hitter, good glove. They think he'll stick it short, but that's about it. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not traveling to the Dominican or Aruba to scout these guys, so I'm kind of subject to the limited information that's out there about them. So hopefully we'll get to see him. I'm big on the eye test. I'm big on watching these guys. All I can go is off of the opinions of others for right now, and what they've said, and the little bit of film of their swings and things like that. But until you see them in games, it's hard to get like a real evaluation on anybody. So, yeah, time will tell. But those are the two guys. And then last season you had Johnny Level, Euhendry Sanchez, Oliver Tejada. So a couple.
It was a pretty nice class. Not a Joshua type signing, but pretty nice class overall, though it looks like there might be some depth there. And ultimately, like I've said on previous shows, like at the end of the day, these guys you're collecting assets here. And if these guys can be solid prospects for you, trade from that depth at some point, because the odds are that all these 16-year-olds are not going to pan out to be major league players, but other teams will be willing to go and take chances on them if you're going and trying to get a veteran rental type player just to help your team mid-season if you're in the playoff mix.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so we're gonna jump right over into the what the title of this video is and the big stuff on this. So the question I think right now out there is, it's not the Dodgers. We all know the Dodgers are going to probably win the West, unless Arizona or San Diego, or I guess the Giants, but I'm not really counting them in that, unless somebody just goes absolutely bonkers and has a 2021 Giants type season and wins 107 games, which still might not be enough, but wins a ton of games. LA is going to win the division. So the focus really shouldn't be on the Dodgers, other than the 12, 13 games or whatever you're playing them. The focus needs to be on Arizona and San Diego, and whether or not you can catch them / pass them in the division, because reality, they're going to be the two teams that they're two of the teams you're competing with for the wild card. I mean, you look around the NL, there's actually a lot of teams that didn't really do anything to improve their rosters. But there are still teams that you would on paper, probably look at and go, yeah, that team's ahead of the Giants right now. Teams like Atlanta, teams like Philly, whatever, two teams aren't going to win of the three that are probably contending for the NL East. But, between the Mets, Braves, and Phillies, only one of those teams is going to win the division. So you're going to have to try and be better than two of the other two. You got to be, Chicago improved their team. Cincinnati, I would say, is better than they were last season with Tito's in the house. They're probably going to play a lot better baseball than they did. And I'd say they've made some, improvements to their roster. Milwaukee, never sleep on the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean, do it at your own risk. I feel like every year we're like, oh, they're getting worse. And then they roll out and win 90. So I wouldn't sleep on the Brewers, but, on paper, they've definitely gotten worse. And then, the Padres in Arizona. So can the Giants catch them? What does it look like in the division this season? And, how much have they improved or regressed or, relative to the Giants? We'll talk about it like that.
Yeah, I would like to start out with the Padres first and foremost. You're looking at pretty much no moves this offseason. They have not spent $1 in free agency yet. You've lost Jurickson Profar, most likely Ha-Seong Kim, Tanner Scott, Donovan Solano, and then you have Musgrove, who's going to be out for the year in their starting rotation. Obviously, Profar was, an all-star player last year for them. He was a huge add to their lineup, somebody that they weren't expecting necessarily a ton out of, and he ended up far exceeding expectations, and he actually just signed with the Braves. And then obviously Kim, he gives you depth in your infield, and he gives you a steady presence at the bottom of your lineup along with his speed. And then you're looking at Musgrove, who's more of a top of the rotation starter, and Tanner Scott, who is a reliable 8th inning guy who could close games out for you. So I think that's significant. And then we also have to consider the fact that Dylan Cease and Luis Ariz have been thrown out there in trade talks for quite a while now, and it's very possible right before the start of the season they go and ship them out. I mean, this is kind of the way the Padres do business. They kind of take on these big name guys and they wait until right before they're going to hit free agency, and they go and trade them out for prospects. And then a year later, they use those prospects and go and trade him out for another guy that's on, got 1 to 2 years left on his current deal. So that's just kind of the way they do business. And when you look at their roster, there's a ton of question marks with those losses and the lack of additions. Roki Sasaki not going to San Diego was a massive deal for a team like the Giants and the Diamondbacks, because now you're looking at the rotation and you're looking at a very old Yu Darvish who, at some point Father Time's going to catch up to him. He's 38. He'll be 39 at the end of this season. And then you're looking at Cease if he doesn't get traded. I do think he gets traded. And then you have Michael King, who is very good for them. And then after that, you have 2 question marks. So I have a lot of doubts about the Padres. And then something, Cody's brought up a ton is, Manny Machado has been slowly declining. He's not quite on the MVP type level that he was a few years ago. And I think you combine all those things and it could be, a pretty down season for San Diego. And I didn't even mention all the issues with ownership over there right now as well. So, Profar even mentioned that, and, part of why he chose the Braves. So there's a lot going on in San Diego right now, and it could be a huge distraction for the team the rest of the way.
And for those wondering with the Machado numbers, what I'm referring to is if you want to just go off of like WAR, like 2021, 2022, he had a 5 WAR and a 6.7 WAR. The last 2 years, it's been 2.9 and 3.1. Like there's been a very definite, his OPS has dropped like over 100 points in those seasons. He's basically taken himself from great player to good player. which, I mean, it's fine. Like, he's still a positive for the Padres. Maybe not at $35 million. He's not a positive, but he's still a positive producer. But it's a step back, and it does weaken what the team looks like going forward in their outlook. So, but I pulled up the standings. Now, Lynn says as of now, Giants are not 9 games better than last season. San Diego's a little worse. Arizona is better with Burns. Dodgers might win 115 games. And yeah, I mean, the 9 games that he's referring to, I think 89 wins got into the playoffs. The Diamondbacks didn't have the tiebreaker, I believe, with the Braves. And then, so will that take 89 wins again? Who knows? It took 84 the year before. I don't think there's a chance in hell that it takes 84 wins again to get in. You're probably looking at closer to 88, 89, 90 wins with how strong the league has gotten. And can the Giants do that? A lot's going to is going to have to go right for them to pull that off. It's one of the things we did say, and I still believe this to be true. And I'm very appreciative of Melvin for having some self-awareness and talking about this, is the fact that they beat themselves too much. They understand that the recipe for them to win games is going to be clean baseball, good situational hitting, move people over, get them in, play clean defense, pitch well, don't give up a bunch of free passes, don't run into extra outs. Like, it's just doing all the little things that they were atrocious at last season. So I felt like if they were just like a league average team situationally, they would have won 6, 7, 8 games more last season, even with all the issues or all the, other problems they might have had. Like, as much as we felt like they weren't, they were a flawed team, and they were partially because of those, I felt like they could win a lot more games if they just played a cleaner brand of ball. And, that's part of why you do try and stock up so much talent, is because if you have the talent to overcome those things, you win a lot. I mean, look at the Yankees. They were one of the worst teams as well, like playing poor defense, running into outs, not doing all the little things. And they were in the World Series because they had a ton of talent. So it's something that the Giants could make up ground just by playing better, cleaner ball. Now, they did improve in talent. I know some people disagree with me and some of us when we say they are a better team on paper than they were last season, even without Blake Snell. I think this team is set up to win 82, 83, 84-ish games based on the roster I see on paper. But, like I said, if they just play a cleaner brand of ball, that number could be even higher. Now, as far as if they can pass Arizona or San Diego, I think, as Ricky pointed out, San Diego is definitively worse on paper. Now, the games aren't played on paper. Who knows? Maybe they end up playing a lot better. But San Diego is pretty clearly a worse team on paper going into next season. And Arizona is the interesting one for me, because a lot of people are going to look at the Burns signing and the Josh Naylor trade and go, all right, this team is better. But now, I was all for bringing Burns here. I think he still has good years left in him. But I will say this. I would be a lot higher on Burns pitching in San Francisco for half his games than pitching in Arizona, especially with his strikeout rate having gone down as much as it has. Now, that said, he does limit hard contact. He does a good job of that. Maybe he'll have a ton of success there, but we did start to see the production slip over the last few years. And then the other part of that is Josh Naylor, they brought him in. That's great, but he's also replacing Christian Walker, who you're probably looking at close to a wash offensively between the two of them. And Naylor is a significantly worse defender than Christian Walker. So maybe that's a net, even at best, but it might even be a downgrade. And then I think people forget how good Jock Peterson was for Arizona last season. Jock Peterson, all jokes about how he was in San Francisco aside, Jock Peterson hit 23 home runs, had a 900 plus OPS, hit like 275. If you go off OPS plus or WRC plus or whatever, he was like 50% better than league average. I mean, he was kind of a force for them against right-handed pitching. So that's going to be a significant loss for them. And then they also lost their closer, and Seawald, whatever.
And he did have a down year last year, but I mean, let's not act like they have a solid pitching staff at all. I know everybody gets hung up on offense. I mean, as you can see in this screenshot that's posted here, they scored more runs than the Dodgers last year, but they also gave up 788 runs, almost 100 runs more than the Giants last year. And I don't think any of us are going to sit here and pretend like the Giants were an amazing pitching staff last year, given all the issues with the rotation. So while I do agree with Lynn to the extent of 9 games is a big improvement for a team like the Giants from year to year, but I do think there is a scenario, just putting on my optimistic cap here, that all of this could play out in the Giants' favor. I look at the Diamondbacks' rotation and honestly their bullpen too, and there are a ton of question marks there. I like Gallen a lot. I think we all do. So that's fine. That's a steady force at the top. But with Burns going to a place where they have an incredibly fast infield, where a lot of ground balls are not going to find gloves and are going to find holes, that's a huge difference with a guy who can't rely on strikeout stuff as much anymore. And he very well could, be the same steady presence as he's been, but that is a possibility. Merrill Kelly's getting very old. Eduardo Rodriguez is basically always hurt, so I don't even consider him any kind of positive in that rotation whatsoever. I mean, I can't remember the last time the guy was actually healthy for a full season. And then you've got Brandon Pfaadt and you've got Ryan Nelson, guys who typically have ERAs in like the mid to high fours. And then you've got who else? Oh, you've got Montgomery. You got Montgomery there, and he was a pumpkin last year. Yeah, he didn't have an offseason, but he very clearly does not want to be in Arizona and is one of those guys we could absolutely see getting traded during spring training because they just want to get rid of him. And a team desperate for pitching might say, hey, we'll take a chance on him and see if he wants to pitch well this year and work his way into a new contract. And then you look at their bullpen, like we said, losing their closer from last year until they obviously removed him from that role at the end of the year is a big deal. And then you look at the rest of their pen, and it's not great, where you could at least say, the Padres at least have some arms over there. But for the most part, I mean, I really think the Diamondbacks are going to struggle to pitch this year. And when you struggle to pitch year in, year out, you're not going to have a consistent product out on the field, plain and simple. Like, you cannot just rely on your lineup to produce 7-8 runs a game and expect to win a ton of games like that. So I definitely expect some regression.
Yeah. I would say, comparing the teams, I think if everyone's healthy, Arizona probably has a better rotation. But I feel like both teams have like pretty solid upside with their rotation. The Giants, obviously, it's going to come from a guy like Kyle Harrison taking a big step forward, Robbie Ray being healthy and productive, and Verlander being healthy and productive. But I will say, I think defensively, it's actually pretty close. Arizona does have a really good defense, particularly in the outfield. But, I think the Giants would have the advantage in the infield. And then I think the Giants definitively have a better bullpen. So, they played Arizona tough last year. Arizona, they have a lot of really solid starters, but the Giants have had success against guys like Gallen. They've had some success against Kelly. They've also had plenty of struggles against both those guys. Same with Pfaadt, Corbin Burns, they have a really solid rotation, but kind of like, as Ricky pointed out, they also have a lot of injury issues. They have, they're all getting older. It'll be kind of interesting. Giants played them well. I think they actually won the season series last season, or they either won it or they went like 6-6 or 6-7 or something. I mean, it was really close. I know that. Same with San Diego. They played them super tough. So, we'll have to see what happens. If they can play well against these teams in their division, hold their own against the Dodgers. I mean, the reality is the Dodgers, it's pretty hard to go 0-13 or 0-12 against a team. The Giants only went 4-9 versus them last season. It wouldn't shock me if that number is like 2-11 or 3-10, but I just don't see them going 0-13 against the Dodgers. Like that's pretty tough to do.
Mhm.
I remember that year when the Giants went like 18-1 against Arizona. I think it was 21. I think it
It
was
was 21.
2021. They were like 18-1 or something like that against Arizona. It was insane.
And
Um,
I remember I was at a game that year, and it was, I don't know if you remember it, but Yaz hit a walk-off grand
yeah,
slam, and the Giants were down like 7 or 8 to nothing in that game. It was just like the Diamondbacks could do nothing right against the
yeah,
Giants that year. It was hilarious.
yeah. Better days. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. I just don't think it's as definitive that Arizona improved, and I think a lot of their improvement is going to rely on Corbin Carroll. Not to put like all
Mhm.
the pressure on one guy, but I think a lot of their potential improvement is going to be Corbin Carroll going back to the guy he was in 2023 and not the guy he was for a large chunk of last season. So
Yeah, they desperately need him to bounce back. I mean, he was barely above league average last year as a player. Obviously, he's going to give you great defense out in the outfield, like you mentioned. Their outfield is very athletic and fast. They cover a ton of ground in that big outfield. But if Corbin Carroll is a 230 hitter and he's got a 107 OPS plus like last year, he was atrocious in the first half last year, and he turned it on with the power a little bit. But if that's just going to be the player he is going forward, that completely changes everything. Like you mentioned, they lost Walker and Jock, which provided a lot of stability in that lineup last year. So I really think you need Carroll to step up. So I don't know. We'll see. I did look, and for context, they were 27th in team ERA last year. So out of 30 teams, they were atrocious. So just because they got Burns does not mean that everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows over there. I mean, look what happened when the Giants had both Webb and Rodon, and then they had, right after that, Snell and Webb. Look how that panned out. You had
yeah,
nothing out of Snell for half a season. And of course, he actually didn't have any kind of an off season whatsoever, but
yeah,
still there is potential for this to blow up on the Diamondbacks and the Padres, and there is potential for the Giants to actually make some noise. You do have to expect some things to go right.
yeah.
And honestly, with the Giants being an 80-win team last year, that was honestly impressive in the sense that they were rolling out some awful lineups last year. Like it's amazing that they even put a couple runs across the board because um
Do
that
I
and
need to
then
pull them up again?
I really don't want to see it, honestly. I still have PTSD from some of those lineups, man. It was atrocious last year. Everything went wrong last year, other than like Snell turning it on in the second half, which didn't end up making any bit of a difference. But you look at how much went wrong last year and how many people were banged up and gone and what the rotation was. I mean, there were times where we went several times through the rotation without any other starters than Logan Webb. So, I
Yeah,
mean, we have to understand that there is just like there's a possibility for the Diamondbacks to get, a bounce back out of Rodriguez or Jordan Montgomery if he does stay there. There's a great possibility that Verlander and Robbie Ray could bounce back. They have honestly just as much consistency in their careers as those two guys with Arizona have. So there's no reason to believe that that's like just, impossible for that to happen. And at some point, with their depth of arms coming up from the minor leagues, you're bound to get one of those guys to have a nice season and actually give you some innings. So, and that is with Jung Hoo Lee. Come on.
this is a lineup
That-
we started last season. The Giants straight punted games in April and May. And how many times did I say, does somebody need to remind them that the games in April and May still count the same in the tally as the ones in September? Like they put some of the worst lineups I've ever seen. This lineup they put out, they had Estrada, Yaz, Murphy, and Ahmed, 4 consecutive. They were literally saying, yeah, spots 6 through 9, we can just go ahead and not give a crap.
And let's stop on that lineup for a second. Lee hurt, Wade hurt almost the entire year. Obviously, you cannot be dependent on him. You have Flores pinch hitting. He was about as horrible as he will ever be. And I'm not even the biggest Wilmer fan, but he was far from the player that he actually is. Soler's not here anymore. He was absolutely atrocious the entire time he was here. Conforto actually started out the season well, but he's streaky. And honestly, a full season of Ramos is far better than Conforto, in my opinion.
Agreed.
You have Chapman for a full season. Tyro was not a major league player last year. Let's be honest. He was not. He was a AAA player.
Is what it is.
Yaz, you're not depending on him as much this year. Tom Murphy, hopefully gone. Hopefully that's Sam Huff next year. And then, do we really need to talk about the last guy?
All right. Let's try this one on. Check the starter out, too. They had Dalton Jeffries, and then once again, we went Tyro Yaz, Tom Murphy, Nick Ahmed at the bottom of the order. I mean, this was a regular occurrence in the early going of the season.
You're literally giving up 9 at-bats a game. That is insane.
And I didn't even go dig hard enough to find one where they had the bottom 4 and they had Slater starting off and leading the game off. I mean, there were games where they were just like, yeah, we're going to just throw 5 outs down the toilet. That's it. I mean, this is where it's like the team should win more games just by having an outright better lineup daily than they were putting out last season.
If we don't, if everybody is relatively healthy this year, there's no significant long-term injuries, how can we not expect some kind of positive regression here? You have guys that were not even close to league average players in that lineup. Honestly, half of that lineup. And just rolling out Fitz, Ramos, and Adames to start the year over those guys.
Yeah. Let me pull this back up for a second.
That is a huge difference.
Check the OPSs. There are only 2 players in this whole lineup that had an OPS over 700.
And it stayed that way for most of the season.
Chapman obviously turned it around eventually, but
yeah,
it was so bad, dude.
These are all like far below league average players, and I refuse to believe that it's going to be the same with Adames, Chapman, Ramos, Fitz, and Lee. I mean, that was the lineup early on in the season. Remember what it looked like come June when Lee was gone? It got a whole lot more dark. So I full on.
What's up, Ryan?
We're actually not even referring to Conforto in that mess. He was far from the issue in that lineup.
Yeah.
We're talking
streaky.
like we're more so worried about Soler, Ahmed, freaking Murphy, my God.
Tyro. I mean,
Tyro was atrocious.
I just think definitively to me this lineup is going to be much more watchable. Now, at the end of the day, the staff is going to have to pull their weight. They're going to have to put enough innings for the bullpen to be a strength, which it should be. Like, it's the one part of this team that I feel can be genuinely good. I should say their defense too. I think defensively this team should be pretty rock solid. Obviously, I don't feel great about what's at first base, but especially if they are going to roll with Yaz, you're probably going to have 3+ outfielders. You're going to have potentially an elite third baseman, a high-end shortstop, and I think Fitzgerald could be pretty damn good at second base. And you have arguably the best defensive catcher in baseball catching games. So I mean, it could be really good defensively. They could have a really good bullpen. Pitching staff needs to pull its weight, eat up some innings. They can't finish 29th or 30th again in innings pitched out of their starting pitchers. And then the lineup just needs to do the little things. And if it does, I mean, I think they're going to be I don't know, 80. If they do good things situationally, I could see them winning like 87 or 88 games, maybe 86. Like I feel like I'm kind of having put my optimism glasses on, but I do think it's possible.
It is hard to think that way, but at the same time, it's like we do have to take a step back and remember all these games we suffered through
Yeah,
and watched and realize how much different of a product is going to be out there this year. I mean, we still don't know what backup catcher is going to be looking like either, but I mean, as you know, whoever that is going to play a good amount of games this year, and just upgrading that too. That is a ton of upgrades, like I said, assuming these guys stay healthy, but there's just going to be so much more stability. And if we can just get back to playing some common sense freaking baseball, especially at the plate, I mean, it makes such a difference in these close games that you're just blowing because you're just giving up at bats. You're taking 0-2 fastballs right down the middle of the plate and not swinging. It's like, what are we doing here? Get back to common sense baseball. Get guys in. How many times did we joke about having bases loaded, no outs, and go, okay, end of the inning, turn it off, and it came true almost every single time. It felt like they were so awful. There is so much room for improvement just by playing just average baseball
yeah,
and not shooting yourself in the foot.
100%.
I truly believe that. And like we said, San Diego did nothing to improve. If anything, they definitely got worse big time, and they very well could continue to get worse with everything that's going on. And if they do fall through with a couple of those trades, and then you look at Philly's got a great roster, but I mean, they're getting pretty old and they've done nothing to their roster as well. They've made no moves, and they actually might end up trading a couple of their guys out too before the season starts. So
I was just gonna say, Bohm supposedly has been on the block for a while. So
I mean, we'll see. And I mean, even the Mets, as hot as they got at the end of last season, I mean, they were a really bad team in the first half. So we'll see if Juan Soto makes that big of a difference on that team. So there's just you could dig for holes on all these wild card caliber teams. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
yeah, and this is true. Soler and Chapman couldn't get a clutch hit all season. That's kind of how it felt. I'm going to bring that last one up. Supposedly, they're not going with an everyday DH. They want to rotate. They want to give guys days off, play the matchup game, which that's fine. Um, if Encarnacion takes a stranglehold on the job, then even more power to him. Uh, I think Soler's biggest issue is I don't like saying it was a bunch of empty numbers, but that's how it felt. Like a lot of solo shots, lots of not coming through in it when they needed a hit. Lots of just he got hot there for a little stretch, kind of pumped his numbers up, but I mean he was hitting like right around the Mendoza line for a chunk of the season. And some bad luck in there. I remember seeing him blister a few balls like right into the third base mitt and things like that, but it felt like all season he was either just missing balls, flying out to the warning track, he was striking out in big situations. It was a rough watch. So wasn't a good fit.
Yeah, and I see people talking about Chapman last year hitting fourth. Yeah, I mean, that goes right back into what I was saying. It's you look at the lineup, there was nobody. I mean, who else was gonna with with the guys they were running out last year, who else is gonna be hitting cleanup in that lineup? Now it's completely different. Especially, like I said, Ramos didn't even come up till a little bit further into the season. Fitz wasn't even in a solidified role. He was hardly playing. He was kind of moving all around, mostly getting pinch hit ABs. It's just a completely different lineup this year, and I don't think we have to worry about that as much. You're not putting as much pressure on the 3 and 4 hitters in the lineup because you're not having just straight up holes in the bottom of your lineup. So
Apparently Verlander is wearing 35. Let's talk to Crawford. I have no issue with this. The guy's a future Hall of Famer. He's 1 or 1A on best pitchers of this generation, right next to Clayton Kershaw. I love Brandon Crawford. He's not a jersey retirement number guy.
No.
I have no problem with this. That's my personal opinion. I know I pissed off a lot of Giants fans because I tweeted about that like a week or two ago. It is what it is. I love Brandon Crawford. He's a Wall of Fame guy. He's a Giant. He's a, he's going to always be revered by this fan base. I have higher standards for what you retire jersey numbers for. And there was standard has always been the Hall of Fame.
You're going to be using triple digits if you're retiring every damn Giants player's jersey.
So
it's like we have to. The Giants fans just have way too much emotional attachment to players that played on those World Series teams, and I understand it. But I mean, let's be real here. If we're not retiring Will Clark's jersey,
they did.
How that?
They did. But Clark put up Hall of Fame number.
Oh, last season
in 22, I think. They put him in the Giants.
Because I'm like, we had. I want to say it was.
But he had a bunch of crappy players wear his number up until like 2022.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm pretty sure Dan Ugla in that like month he was on the Giants wore his number. It's like, are we kidding? We're not gonna let a guy who has had a way better career than Crawford wear his number. Like, that is no disrespect to Crawford at all. Like, if anything, that's respect that the guy that's gonna take your number now is a future Hall of Famer. I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I think realistically, and not to go on like a whole tangent here, there are 2 numbers that are going to get retired from that group, and you could make a case for 2 others. I think definitively Buster Posey and Bruce Bochy's numbers are never going to get worn again because those 2 guys are going to be in Cooperstown. Yeah. And then I think you could make a case for Mad Bum and you can make a case for Timmy. Everybody else, I love Kane. You don't retire his number. I love Crawford. You don't retire his number. Same with Belt. Same with a lot of these guys. And Timmy and Mad Bum aren't going to be Hall of Famers. But Timmy had he put up a lot of, like, he did a lot of things that there's not a lot of Hall of Famers that have done them, like multiple Cy Youngs, multiple no-hitters. He had a pretty insane kind of career, as short-lived as it was. And then Madison Bumgarner was probably on a Hall of Fame track until he fell off an ATV. Yeah. Like, those are the only 2. And he freaking carried them to a World Series. Like, that's as close as we're ever going to witness to a player single-handedly winning a World Series for a team.
They had no business winning the World Series that year, so
they had no business advancing out of any of those series.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get much more legendary than that run. So yeah, I'm with you. And honestly, me personally, I'm not the biggest on retiring jerseys because at some point you look at the Yankees, it gets way out of hand. Yeah. At some point we got to get over that. Throw their number on a sign in the stadium, honor that number, but recycle the number at some point. You can give it time for these legendary players, but at some point recycle it. You're going to have other good players come through. You don't want to get to the point where you have some generational talent and you're like, here's number 63. Have fun. It's like, nobody wants to see that. Come on.
94 is just not going to hit different?
Yeah, it's like, you guys want Bryce Eldridge to wear freaking 64? You know how ugly that would look?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
I'm like,
I'm good with that.
I'm just like, we just got to get past that because the Giants, it's a storied franchise and they have a lot of worthy players of having their jersey retired. Yeah. I'm just not the hugest fan of it personally.
I liked that they bent on that with Bonds and Clark. Like, those 2, I totally, because Bonds should be in the Hall. And then Clark, if Clark played in today's game with his numbers, he would be in the Hall of Fame. People forget that he walked away a few years early. He could have sat there, played like 3 more years, racked up the counting stats he needed, and gotten in. And he retired to be with his family, which, more power to him. He was really damn good his last season of his career in St. Louis. So I'm cool with those 2.
Yeah.
But we're going to move on to the next topic because I got to do a hard stop at 10 o'clock tonight, everybody. So we're gonna move on to the next topic here. Really quick, we do have like 166 people here. If you do enjoy the content, please do hit the like button, subscribe, drop us, hit the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. If you're interested, follow the any of the X, Instagram, TikTok. I've been putting more prospect content on Instagram in particular and TikTok. I'm going to try and start doing that a little more regularly. I dropped a Tibbs video and a Wizen Hunt video, and the reasons are not at all to try and get these people on the show. But no, but yeah, we've been putting more content there. Should we say anything about the other thing on Instagram, or just let that one go?
The other channel?
Yeah.
Or the other page?
Yeah.
If you guys want to drop a follow, I just started one as well. It's SF Giants Cove. It's like an orange and black logo. Should be pretty easy to find. I'll be sharing some of Cody's content on there just to promote the channel more. I'll be doing a lot of prospect stuff once the minor league season comes around. I'll probably throw some weekly updates as far as, stat leaders go. Stuff like that. I'll be dropping some video on there on them, sharing, throwback videos, random stuff, a little bit of everything. And we will be trying to get some more prospects on throughout the season. Got a handful of them following that page right now. So we will be trying to get that going at some point during the season as well. So
yeah,
drop that a follow if you guys get a chance. Definitely make sure to subscribe to Cody's channel. If you guys are on X, just hop over there real quick, hit the sub. We're getting really close to 1,500. We want to get that next giveaway going. So please make sure you guys check that out. What are we, like 60 something short right now?
Yeah. As of right now, we are 51 shy. So appreciate all you guys that have subscribed. And if you don't want to subscribe, whatever, that's your thing. Hopefully you still enjoy the content though. And we're going to try and keep bringing more. We have some other ideas when the season gets going. Gonna hit some minor league games. We're gonna definitely be going to a game. I know there's a lot of you guys that have keeps telling me like, hey, tell us when we go to a game. When we go, we'll let you guys know, and anybody that's there, you can come say what's up. So
yeah, for sure.
We love talking with you guys. So but next topic. So like I said, we're gonna have to do this in like 18 minutes. Next topic. We're going to address what we like to call we'll call it the Dodger problem around baseball right now. The league looks kind of trending towards a lockout after 2026. The reality is the Dodgers are spending just ungodly amounts of money. There's an uneven playing field on the amount of money. And I'm not trying to sit here and sound like, oh, I'm whining, boo-hoo, our team's playing poor and all this stuff. I'm not trying to go there. But realistically, when you look at how the TV deals work, when you look at all the stuff, it's an uneven playing field. Like that's just the reality of the situation. And a lot of people, the guys like Jeff Passan, guys like John Heyman, Ken Rosenthal, all these people like to go, oh, well, it's good for baseball because it's going to make all these other teams try and put together truly great teams. I think that's bullshit, personally. They're not, because the reality is, and you're kind of seeing it with the Giants, I feel like right now, is a lot of these teams and these owners are going, why would I spend a bunch of money when we have zero shot at winning a World Series? Like, why am I going to go drop all this money to chase, I made the joke about the Giants, to chase 86 wins and a miracle wildcard appearance when we have no shot in all reality. So I think it's going to have the opposite effect. And we're going to kind of talk about how we think the league can potentially, and, God, I hate Manfred, but, how the league can potentially improve the current situation and what, the direction we feel like they should go. Now, whether they can come to an agreement with the Players Association, that's going to be interesting. It very well, we could see a long lockout, I think, out of this. But do you have any kind of thoughts? I know I have like a whole thing, but do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, we need to somehow, some way, not allow teams to stretch out money and defer money so far back. I think it's absolutely insane that the Dodgers can push back money into an escrow account to basically get Shohei Ohtani for practically nothing, because they're going to be paying him when he's like, I think, oh man, what is it? 68 million when he's like 38 years old. Like, that's just That's just insane. And then the fact that basically all this money thrown into account is going to pay, it's going to pay for itself because basically you're making money off of jersey sales, your TV numbers, all the marketing that's done with Otani, and then just the draw he is alone. And it's like great for them, obviously any team would want to do that same thing, but they shouldn't be allowed to basically push a $70 million a year player his contract over such a long period of time. It's insane. If Shohei's son makes it to Major League Baseball, he can make it to the big leagues and they will still be paying Otani's contract. That is ridiculous. And we're not talking a few million. Like I said, it's literally around 68 million per year at the back end of his contract. That's just ridiculous because you're allowing the biggest team in baseball to go and just stretch out money, basically not pay the best player in the league all for the next handful of years, and then basically just acquire whoever the hell they want. That is insane. There has to be some kind of limits on this. It's too much. And then, there's always the excuse, oh, it's good for baseball because the Dodgers are going to make the league so much money. Okay, well, you have 29 other teams that just simply cannot do that. And then there's always the excuse, well, the owners can be spending that kind of money too. Well, the realistically, the owners are not going to spend that kind of money when they're in a small market because the team is not going to be that profitable. You can't just sit here and expect owners to take massive losses year after year. They're business owners at the end of the day. They're just because they have money doesn't mean they're going to recklessly spend money when they're not going to be able to make that money back on ticket sales and jerseys and things of that nature, whether it's because of the market they're in or because the team they inherited, whatever it may be. You just can't expect every team to do that because they're not operating under the same TV deal the Dodgers are. That is the reason why they're so willing to spend an insane amount of money. And obviously they have a great market they're in. It's a huge market. I mean, they have two teams there. So obviously, but it's just, you got to find a way to stop that. I'm not saying you necessarily need a super strict hard cap, but there needs to be stricter penalties because otherwise the Dodgers will continue to do what they're doing, or even get harsher with the penalties on draft picks too.
Yeah.
And make it to where they're literally not getting anything in the draft every year. And at some point you've got an extremely expensive payroll and you've got no youth coming through ever. And they're in a position where at some point they're going to have to take on some really dark years where they just have nothing on their roster.
Yeah. I think, and I want to acknowledge one thing with LA. Like, we could put a hard salary cap in and they would still be one of the best teams in baseball. Like, they've drafted well, or at least they've had a strong system. They've traded, they've sold high on a lot of prospects to bring in talent. Like, there are a lot of things that the Dodgers do, like just the style of ball they play. They don't give away outs. They don't beat themselves, even with ungodly amounts of talent. Like, they would still have one of the best teams in baseball, but they would not have a team that is nearly unbeatable when you look at it. Like, this team is ridiculous that they've put together and has virtually no weakness on the roster. So that's a big difference. So like that's kind of where I'm at with that. But kind of the way I look at it, and we talked about the TV deals. I don't have the very minute details on this, but I do know that a lot of the teams are subject. I think it's called like the 52-48 rule. Like 52% they get to keep the profit. Like 48 goes back to I don't know if it's like league for revenue sharing or whatever. The Dodgers somehow found a loophole with their deal where they don't have to pay that. Essentially, they get to keep a huge portion of the money. As Ricky pointed out, a lot of owners, like, they're not going to take a loss. You look at the people at the top two teams in spending. The Dodgers are number one, and they're going to make a 9-figure profit. Then you have Steve Cohen, who's paying like $74 million less, and he's taking an 8-figure loss. And that's how it would be for most teams. You can't expect all these owners, as much as we all want to be like, oh, they're billionaires, boo, freaking who, pay whatever you want. Like, these guys aren't going to just bleed out tens of millions of dollars a year just because the fans want to see a winner. Like, that's not going to happen. It's just not realistic. So it's just kind of Like that part, that's where it's like it's an uneven playing field. And personally, I would love to see them go because you as someone mentioned, the cap's probably a pipe dream, but I do think the cap is attainable with a floor. And obviously, the number can't be hard that it's like never going to move. Like it's going to have to be kind of like what the tax does now. It's going to have to jump up a couple million every year, and you're going to have to keep moving it. But to me, go the way of revenue sharing. I'm pretty sure that's how the NFL kind of does their stuff now with all the TV money. Is go the way of revenue sharing and make a put a cap in there and then put a pretty significantly high floor and basically force the teams like the A's and the Rays and that are in these smaller markets to actually invest in the product because they're going to be making astronomical amounts of money even on teams like the Dodgers, just like teams like the freaking Jaguars are making a ton of money on the Cowboys, Niners, Patriots, Packers. They're making huge money off those teams. So it forces them to do that. And if you have an owner like Jeff Fisher that's going to be like, I'm not going to spend that, make them sell. Like that, you're going to have to go some kind of route like that to get any kind of equity in the league. Because to me, it's not just a Dodger problem. It is truly a problem with all the small market teams just saying like, nah, we're not going to spend this money. So you need to find a way to improve the overall product. And I think if you put a pretty substantial floor in, I don't know what that number is. Maybe you hard cap it at like, I don't know, 275, and then you put a floor at like 175. I'm just throwing numbers out there. That would, there are teams around the league where you're adding $100 million to their payroll. Like there is a lot more money to go around for these players. They're losing less money than they're gaining, if that makes sense. Like the top end teams are only going to come down a little bit other than LA, obviously, but there's a lot of teams that hover down in the not even over 100 million or low hundreds range. So I don't know. I think that's part of the solution. And then as far as the deferrals go, like to me, the tax hit should be whatever the AAV is on the contract. Now, how you pay it out is between you and the player. If Shohei Ohtani wants to take $68 million a year for the 10 years following his contract, hey, that's on him. I don't care. If it's not my money. If he wants to wait to get paid that, good for you, bud. But the Dodgers tax hit should be $70 million a year, not 2 or 46 or whatever it is. It's like 46 because they put it on present value. Like that's just, to me, it's a loophole that needs closing.
Yeah, no, plain and simple. And I mean, honestly, going back to the hard cap thing, while I don't think that's necessarily the route they need to go, I do think it would affect the Dodgers a lot more quickly had they gone a route like that, just because you're looking at, even if they go and trade all their top prospects for, back when they traded Mookie Betts, you're not going to be able to afford to just keep going and acquiring guys like that and then go and continue to pay them. You're going to get them for a year or two, and then you're going to either have to pay him or get rid of other guys. And that's the issue, is they don't have to do any of that. They can just keep stacking. And that's the problem. It just never catches up to them. And then, going back to the TV deal, I was looking into it, and the Dodgers jointly own all of their TV network, basically. So they're racking in all of the profits, and the Giants only own 30% of NBC Sports Bay Area, and the rest is all owned by Comcast. So, I mean, that's a big difference. Luckily, the Giants ownership group owns a ton of real estate surrounding the stadium. So, and then that paired with the A's hopefully eventually moving out of state, at least for the Giants' sake. The Giants are going to be making a ton of money as well. It's just, we're talking more Major League Baseball in general. The Giants have been bad with development and drafting. That's been the bigger issue. But we're talking MLB in general. There's just not enough competition for the Dodgers because nobody's going to be able to keep up with that. Outside of the Yankees, the Dodgers have the biggest cash cow in the league with their TV deal. And it just makes such a big difference when you're pulling in that kind of revenue from another source outside of just, your stadium sales with, as far as jerseys and tickets and food and all that stuff goes. So it's just, it's honestly a super unfair advantage. And I'm not trying to sound like some whiny Giants fan. Like, that's really not what it comes down to. It's it's ridiculous when a team like that can't win a real World Series, and then it comes down to, oh, we're literally paying everybody and their mother, getting rid of prospects who are not worth Mookie Betts, and basically able to just fork out whatever cash to him, then Freddie Freeman, then Ohtani, then Blake Snell, and you're not paying the bill on any of that. That's just, there's way too many loopholes in that. At some point you need to get a little bit more serious around the league, because just doing a little revenue sharing when it comes to, international pool money and stuff like that, and draft picks, a couple draft picks, it's not going to hurt a team like that. You got to get harder on what kind of, restrictions are going to be placed on them going forward when this new CBA comes out.
Yeah. And it's not like I said, I'm not trying to aim for like perfect parity. I'm not trying to discredit the Dodgers and how they operate. Like, they should operate the way they do. They're making a ridiculous amount of money. Use it. Good for them.
Yeah.
And they, like I said, they do draft and develop well. They do, sell high on these guys. They do play a good brand of ball. They are an attractive destination for free agents. Like, they're going to do all these things and continue to be one of the best teams at baseball. But I just think there needs to be more equity and more forcing the other markets to step up their game. And that's where I think this whole thing could improve. So,
yeah.
And there's a few. I'm just reading some of the comments. San Fran fan, his hit, I'm trying to find it exact number. It might actually be like 43 million on the tax. Following the 10 years, it's going to be like 26. That's all it's going to hit, even though they're paying him $68 million actual. But you're correct that typically the tax hit is AAV. So that's why, like, Robbie Ray this year, he makes 25 million actual. His tax hit's like 23 or something like that because of the deal he had signed. So that's the normal, but deferrals kind of fudge the whole thing and allow for a lot of a lot of loopholes to do kind of what LA is doing. And that's why I'm just saying, like, in my opinion, it should be the tax. Like, if anything, they need to close that loophole, because if LA wants to do what they're doing, fine, but tax the hell out of them on what they're doing. Like, that's what we're asking here.
If they're going to spend that much money, just make it hurt, plain and simple. I mean, the NBA did the same thing with the Warriors during their dynastic run. Same thing that Joe
Lacob to Eddie.
yeah, going a little bit further back for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we have to remember that too. I mean, the Niners were kind of doing the same thing that the Dodgers are doing, but in the NFL before they installed a hard cap, and the Niners had to pay that bill at some point, and it really hurt them for quite a while. I mean, look how long it took them to get relevant again after that came into place. So yeah, I mean, you can't fault the Dodgers for taking advantage of the system that's in place. But when you're renegotiating the CBA, you do have to change these things. It's not good for the league. Baseball is at a point where they're trying really hard to get young fans engaged. And if you're a fan in Kansas City, Milwaukee, pretty much anywhere in Florida, all over the country, you're Colorado, you're not going to be engaged as a young kid when you're like, oh, the Dodgers are the only team that's good and exciting anyways. None of the other teams have any star players. It's horrible for the league. I mean, even in the NBA, in a league where you legitimately have stars going and jumping to other teams to form super teams, or what they think are super teams, you really don't have that in the MLB for the most part, other than really the Dodgers and the Yankees. But you also don't have stars being spread out around the league like you should. Like Bobby Witt in Kansas City, that's a good start, but you need more of that to get fans engaged. You got to give them some kind of hope and some reason to want to come and watch a game. It's horrible for the league going forward. And baseball, of any of the major sports, desperately needs that young fan base coming in and getting engaged in baseball again.
Yeah. I'm gonna bring up Haruku's comments here really quick before we hop off, because I gotta get going here in a minute. But I think he mentions like the Padres owner dying was kind of what stopped them. The Met, Cohen wants to win, and then he kind of brings up the A's owner. This is what we're saying. Like it addresses both sides, because it's not just the Dodgers. Like there's a bottom half of the tax bracket, or of the tax paying, or not tax paying teams, but the payroll teams. Like they're a problem too. That's why we're saying like a floor and a cap would be ideal, because you force the bottom end to start paying and investing into their product. And again, why would they want a cap? Well, if you insert a floor that's high enough, there will actually be more money to go around to players.
Yeah.
You just have to find what the number is where it's going to, they're not losing as much on the top end as they're gaining on the bottom end. That's where we're at.
I mean, what other major sport are you seeing several teams in free agency not spending a single dollar? Like that is insane.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 or 3. Well, the Marlins finally signed like a league minimum player, I think. So yeah, it's terrible. But I think that's what we're gonna have to call it. I got to wrap it up. I appreciate all you guys for jumping in here tonight. We'll definitely be doing a live next Friday, and I'll probably post a couple videos next week. We're kind of, I feel like every day I'm hoping for something to happen so we have like a good story. But as Bill Murray once said, it's Groundhog Day again, and that's how I feel about every single morning when nothing's happening. So, all right, everybody, appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next Friday. Yeah, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and we'll chat you guys all later.
All right, thank you guys.